Hello and welcome to Addis Matters, our show on Ethiopian current affairs with me, Begna Simesso. This is part of our COVID special series. As coronavirus continues to affect the world, we are analyzing all aspects of the virus, from the science of the pandemic to its political, economic, social consequences, with rigor and global perspective. In this episode, we shall dwell in arts in the time of pandemic. I have two guests, ladies, to look deep into the matter. Dr. Mihret Mandefro, CEO and President of Truth Aid Media Group, a medical doctor and a film producer, and Liya Haile, Country Director to Girl Effect. Welcome to the show and thank you for your time, views, and insights. When it comes to COVID-19, numbers are becoming elusive. The figure is growing by the day, both in terms of infection and mortality rate. Millions globally are infected with the deadly virus and hundreds of thousands died so far. As in most technological advancement cases, Africa has joined the global community at last, sharing the burden of others to suffer from coronavirus. Relatively, so far, Africa is in a better position. Dr. Mihret, if I may, let me start with you with a sort of personal question. You're a medical doctor. You went to the prestigious Harvard Medical School and studied both medicine and anthropology at Harvard, and then you did a master's in public health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Highly qualified medical professional with lots of experience and high-ranking appointments, including serving the Obama administration. But now, your major work is not medicine. You're an executive producer to a film company. Why? Doctor by profession, filmmaker by passion?
No, I actually think there's a very deep connection between teaching people and stories. What I learned in my career is I've published papers, I've made policy reviews, but if you really want to make an impact in the world, you actually have to meet people where they're at, and that's not in academic journals. So about 15 years ago, my HIV research, my master's work in London was on HIV stigma in Ethiopia. I had come here, worked here on data, collected data from HIV positive women on their experiences of stigma, and we turned that into kind of a toolkit with the International Center for Research on Women. In the middle of doing that project, I met a filmmaker who was fascinated with my work and was like, you know, you really should consider making a film about this. So we embarked on that journey, and it totally changed my life because after one film, so many people knew about my work, and I was having such profound conversations in America. The film went on to be the World AIDS Day film for Showtime Networks, and I literally was on the road for about 2 years talking to very vulnerable populations about their understandings around HIV risk, what they know, and what I understood in that moment was, wow, all these expert people have it very backwards when it comes to knowledge and how you teach people. And at that point, I made a big turn and I founded Truth Aid with my business partner, Lacey Schwartz Delgado. So Truth Aid is a media company that leverages media to teach about the social determinants of health and wellness. So we've had big media projects in the States on race, on health disparities, behavioral health issues, aging, a host of health issues. And I think it is a much better way to teach people than pamphlets or brochures or papers. So that's why I do it. I actually talk about my work as visual medicine. And in a country like Ethiopia where literacy rates are so low, it's actually the biggest bang for the buck, which is why I'm so glad I'm on stage with my colleague from Girl Effect, because they understand this point, and I think it's a very, very cost-effective use of public health resources actually to invest in storytelling, meeting people where they're at, and trying to teach people, because as much as we love them, people are not rational, you know? And you kind of need to access their hearts and minds in order to teach them. Long-winded answer, but I actually think of what I do as very important global public health work. I don't just think of it as film work.
Let me stay with you for a bit. As a medical doctor and public health advisor, how do you rate Ethiopia's response to COVID-19?
You know, it's really hard to say. I think Dr. Liya is fantastic. I think we couldn't have a better health minister in this moment. She has the right temperament, and I think she's doing an incredible job. But we have to back up and understand the global context of healthcare and these issues. Ethiopia's health system has been going through a pretty impressive transformation over the last 10 years. Some of this started under Dr. Tedros, and they're pushing forward, you know. But ultimately, you know, COVID is really testing our tertiary healthcare capacities as well. In a country like Ethiopia, if we don't prevent it, we already know we don't have enough ventilators, right? And we don't have kind of the skilled labor that we need to have if it gets to that point. So from that metric, I actually think we're doing okay. You know, the fact that they instituted swift quarantines, that they've been aggressively testing, going after cases, and really approaching contact tracing in a much better way than other countries like North America is actually a positive in my opinion.
Great, thank you. Liya, let me come to you. Tell us a bit about what you do at Girl Effect. Girl Effect is a UK-based charity, and it has a brand called Yenya in Ethiopia, which provides creative solutions and creative interventions to some of the social ills girls in Ethiopia face. Briefly, tell us what you do.
Well, me personally, I'm currently the Deputy Country Director at Girl Effect Ethiopia, and what we do is, in Ethiopia, we do mainly Yenya, and Yenya is a product of a behavior change media program, and we try to create these types of brands in different countries. So we have a number of other brands as well. We have a brand in Malawi and Rwanda, and we work mainly around adolescent girl. And we also focus around health as well, because it's one of the things that we kind of focus on for that age group. But what we do is we try to create media programs that educate. So like Mihret said, it's one of the main ways, and we are believers in storytelling, in the power of brands and in the power of media to be able to kind of educate people, and specifically young people, adolescent kids, to the benefit of girls mainly. So we deal with issues like teen marriage, teenage pregnancy, SRH issues, MHM, education, any different barriers that kind of surround the girl. And we kind of come at it from a perspective of we need to represent the society and those girls. So every girl that you will see in the Yenya stories are going to be somebody that you know, or they're going to be like you when you are kind of a teenager. So it's something that we kind of take up to be able to tell stories and also bring about messages around different issues that matter to young people.
So basically you produce music, you produce TV drama, yes. You're invested in art. So our focus today is art in time of pandemic. So let me ask you, how do you rate the impact of corona pandemic in arts in general, globally and in Ethiopia? Liya, you can start and I'll come to you.
Yeah, so I think specifically with art, COVID-19 has both threats and opportunities. And I think that's the same for every other topic as well with regards to COVID-19. In terms of threats, there's obviously the fact that there's less in the economy, and what that means is there will be less kind of going into the arts, because it's mostly seen as something that doesn't kind of that's not as important, which is completely not true, obviously, but that's something that kind of comes up. And the other threat is obviously in the way that production is made. There's a lot of contact, there's a lot of ways. So it's something that's shifting and changing and adapting. So it kind of creates barriers around it. So in terms of creating stories or wanting to do things, then you have much more tighter parameter than you would normally have. when it comes to the opportunities, I think we're seeing it now largely, and it's around digital, and it's kind of accelerating this growth that digital was already on, and it's creating innovators in different ways. And I think like every other crisis, the best innovation kind of comes out of crisis, and I think that's what we're going to see with arts as well. So we're going to see a lot of innovative ways of doing things that possibly we might not have seen, and we're kind of getting forced into that, and it can be seen as an opportunity and a positive, especially in terms of kind of cost-effective ways of doing things and other means of being able to do what we want to do, but in a different way. So we're being forced into an opportunity in a way.
Dr. Mihret.
Globally, I think COVID has been absolutely devastating to the artist community because a lot of them work on a freelance economy, and those jobs kind of went away. Anyone who had production this year just shut down. And I think my heart really goes out to the filmmakers who finally got a premiere at Cannes and wherever else, and then just literally overnight, all that work went away. So I think the film community in particular is recovering and trying to figure it out. I think ultimately for Africa, it's going to be great because I think what's happening right now is the way that you can pitch and greenlight projects used to be like whoever had the money to go to LA and the connections to like pitch to the right people. But I think we're entering an era where pitching virtually and working from a distance is actually going to be possible, which is really great for creators here. So, like Liya said, a threat and an opportunity, but I think the distribution is a real question, how we're going to recover, because film festival markets play such an important role in distribution deals that I think everyone's trying to figure out what that means, which probably means, the streamers and the online kind of platforms are going to have an uptick in what they consume or what they're going to buy and from who.
Yeah, event cancellations, venue closures, stay-at-home orders, and to avoid physical and social distancing have affected, I think, the art community. Lots of concerts have been cancelled, movie theaters are closed. But at the same time, both of you mentioned the opportunity that it has created. The race to create the Corona anthem is heating up on Spotify alone. We've seen close to 500 songs on Corona. 473 to be exact. Most of them are rubbish, some of them are becoming viral. They call them, the LA Times called it pandemic pop. For a moment, let's compare that with the ongoing vaccine projects. There are 200 vaccine projects. If music was really a medicine, we have like 500 studios have produced songs on Corona. 200 laboratories are struggling, to find the vaccine to it. But I believe art can play a role in this, isn't it? You're a believer in the power of storytelling and media, in theater and in film. Mm-hmm. What role can art play?
Look, an artist's role is to really be a light at its best. I think art shines a light in the way that society has to go. It helps to birth kind of futures that have yet to exist. We are currently in a global movement around Black Lives Matter, for example. And I think creating a world where Black lives actually matter, it's incumbent on the people who see that world to help usher it in. Oftentimes, if you look at the biggest changes, social changes, look at civil rights in America, artists were at the forefront of that. I have a movie coming out that I produced with an incredible director named Yoruba Richin and my producing partner, Lacey Schwartz. That's coming out next year on American Masters and hopefully online somewhere. But it's all about how female entertainers have used art as a political force to really move a conversation forward. And that's what artists do. So in this time, what I've been telling artists is use this time for development. Work on your craft. I think spending all this time internally is actually going to benefit all of us in terms of the kind of insights that's going to come out of that work. Even with Yenya, which I work with Liya on, we're really trying to use this time to really make our stories good so that they can travel far. So that's what art is going to do. And honestly, Arundhati Roy, one of my favorite writers, said the pandemic is like a portal into a world that has yet to exist. right? So are we going to do the work now to structure the world so that everyone has opportunity, so that justice is kind of the measure? I think those are the kinds of things, or, artists are like the moral compass of humanity, They remind us where we need to go. So I think our world is very broken. And I think the pandemic has made it very obvious that some disparities, some people are always going to die. Black people are always going to die at higher rates until the world changes, right? And until we hold institution structures and have the imaginative abilities and capabilities actually to take the steps that we need to usher in that new world. So I think artists are incredibly important right now.
Great. Liya, Yenya hasn't produced a song on Corona yet. I mean, the Yenya group has been singing about everything, from underage marriage to access to education and other general health matters. Are you not going to produce one?
Probably not.
No. Is it because of the race, Others are doing, there are lots of crap Corona songs.
No, I think we might do different things around Corona and COVID-19, and I think Yenya can play a really big role in kind of, being part of that media that kind of brings about that change and that draws that future, what the future looks like, and that it can be a mix of that, but probably not through a song for now, but through other things, and yeah.
But you can add on what can art play in this, with HIV, for instance, the media, the radio, TV, dramas, music, were very powerful in educating the public, also in creating behavior change. So in relation to COVID-19, would you like to add anything on the role art can play on this?
Yeah, I guess, just to give you kind of a little bit of also measures that we've done and surveys that we've done, and kind of showing the difference between people that do follow the programming and for example, around HPV, we've done around HPV vaccination, we've done programming in the past season. And what we have is, in terms of just numbers of people that know about the vaccination or that know about cervical cancer, you can see a really large disparity between people that have watched the TV show versus people that haven't. So it's like for people that haven't watched it, it's about 36%. Meanwhile, for people that have watched, it's about 70%. So that difference, that's what media does, and that's what specifically Yenya does as well. So we're trying to take these topics and kind of educate people in ways that they don't know they're getting educated. They just are watching something interesting, a fun story to follow, and then in the midst of it all, they get something which is beneficial to them, and they know better for themselves and for their health. So I think that it's the same role that we're going to try and play, and I think we can look back to HIV/AIDS and other types of activations as well, and we're going to see that media has a lot of power in this instance, and those fans and those audiences that you create, those are the people that you kind of, you're instilling either a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of, a little bit of attitudinal change and things like that, and which really matters in the long run.
Dr. Mihret, you advised artists to use this opportunity in time of stay at home and lockdown. It gives a kind of opportunity for artists, to reflect with themselves, to have a time of contemplation and thinking. They say Shakespeare produced 3 of his masterpieces, King Lear, Macbeth, and Antony and Cleopatra during bubonic plague. So would you like to add on some pieces of advice for artists to use this time?
Look, I think the most important is you have to have your support systems, understand what your creative practice is going to be that will allow you to write, and make sure that support system is in place. I think there's a lot of grants out there that people should also know about, financial relief and real support for artists all around the world around COVID, because people have recognized that, they might not be able to go on. So make sure you're Googling and like artist relief grants. They actually exist. But the truth is, I actually think all of us need time to contemplate, not just artists. I was just telling Liya, it's been so humbling. Been homeschooling 3 kids in French for lycée, and me and my husband have been learning all kinds of things about our children that we did not know before. So I do think there's a way in which COVID is forcing all of us to kind of spend time with ourselves and get in touch with kind of maybe the more important things in life. And I really believe, and I have to believe on the other side of that, will be a lot of goodness, not just good art, but also hopefully good human beings.
Let me jump over to affairs in the media, particularly you mentioned global media, how challenging time it is. Even for local media, it's a very difficult time. One TV channel has been closed so far during the pandemic. ETV, the state-owned channel, has asked for 190 million birr of government funding as a sort of bailout, or in the form of state subsidy. You work for Ghana TV as well. You are head of social impact at Ghana Television. How are you keeping with this difficult?
I think Ghana has been run very effectively. I think the leadership at the team has often, and I don't think people appreciate enough how much Ghana is actually based on research. And I would venture to say we're probably one of the most, if not the most, research-based media business. I think everything we do at Ghana is based on, research and numbers and data. And so that makes you agile as a company. You can pivot, recognize opportunity, find new revenue streams. And I think that's what Ghana has always been good at, is actually staying ahead of the curve and trying to find ways. So it's actually financially very healthy. And it's a real testament that I think we're technically the largest TV station in Addis, like in terms of the number of people we actually employ. We haven't had to let go of anyone in this pandemic because I think they've been very good about, okay, what is the numbers saying? What is the research saying? What are the other ways that we can pivot and make this all work? So I credit the leadership for that. I don't think they get enough credit. I know Ghana is known for many, many things, but I don't think people understand we have an in-house full research team that collects numbers. We're completely data-driven, and that is really helping us right now.
Yeah, Ghana's the reputation of Ghana. But I want you, if you can, to give a piece of advice to others, because this is like a campaign against everyone. I mean, there are a couple of TV channels that I know of who are really struggling, could be off air anytime.
Yeah, I have thoughts about that. I mean, I think my thoughts on that is Ethiopia has to liberalize the TV advertising market. And we have to let go of heavy-handed regulations. Ultimately, the era of private media is supposed to be about free expression and press. And I think some of the regulations can make that difficult at times, But I think it's really, the ad market has gone like this, and TV is an ad-run business. And so I'm not surprised that it is that way, right? So I think TV channels have to really think about whether it's digital, diversifying their revenue models, finding new ways to bring money in. And I'm a big believer that content still wins, but I also think now in this new era, audience wins in the sense of back in the 90s, they used to say content was king, right? Whoever had content, and content is still really important. But I think another piece of the media market that's changing that innovators need to key in on, and at Ghana, we talk about this a lot, is it's about also social engagement, right? Creating content within community, right? Having content that lends itself to kind of events, right? And your audience, and really paying attention to audience, I think is a really important thing to do. And I think there's opportunities, low-hanging fruit for creators and TV stations to really figure out, okay, if the ad market is completely dry, what are the other ways that we can start to bring in revenues, But you have to make that a priority, and you probably have to, do a little bit of research and data testing around, okay, what makes sense in that kind of climate. I don't think enough people invest in data. That's why I led with that. I really don't think people do that. People don't value data. Ratings. We tried, this idea that ratings will help all of us. People hate ratings in Ethiopia because they want to stay data dark so that they can just say, we're the number one, and we're so stuck in this country and think we do not understand the concept that the pie can be so much bigger if we all just work together. Working together in our market is not easy. right? Everyone like holds on to their little piece and they're like, my little piece. And I'm like, it's a little piece. Like let go of it. Let's all make the pie bigger and then your piece gets bigger, right? I mean, that idea, and I think in our market in particular, like ratings, real ratings, you know? I mean, you know, people tried to drive out some of the ratings companies, you know? Like people really don't want to have the numbers decide what the market should be, because that means you have to perform, you know?
Data collaboration and liberalization. Thank you. Liya, let me come to you. Coming back to COVID, in your previous season of Yenya TV drama, there was a hand-washing scene, repeated hand-washing scenes.
Was there?
Yeah.
Which episode is this?
Well, you could, I mean, in a way, it's a kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
It
We
seems
knew
like
COVID was coming, so we put in hand washing.
you can claim
So actually,
if you
it's-
want to.
I know. We did. We were doing a lot of
But
hand washing.
I mean, on a
too.
serious note, Yenya was concerned about hand washing and total hygiene.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. I mean, about the hand washing, particularly the hand washing issue within the Yenya drama.
Well, I mean,
If you give us clips,
Yeah.
we can play it as well.
Yeah, we did have a problem, which was around actually deworming, wasn't it?
Deworming was the first
Yes,
thing. Okay.
deworming was the main kind of health topic around it.
Yeah.
But it was because one of the main characters was having worms because he wasn't washing his hands whenever he ate food. But then when he was sick, he thought it was because he was in love. Because he thought that butterflies in his stomach was the worms, but no, actually, it was he had to deworm. So there was messaging around that within the TV show. But another side of this is around COVID, when COVID was kind of just starting up. I remember we were looking at the last episode, and there was one scene in which there was a lot of people shaking hands and hugging and saying kind of congratulations, hello, and things like that. It was the final performance. And we were like, should we cut that? Is this something we want to promote? In trying to be proactive and you know, looking at what we've produced, does that make sense for that time and for that you know, real life situation? So we did. There's a lot of things that we had to kind of put into consideration with.
Yeah, as I said,
COVID.
if you give me the clips, we can play it.
Yes, I will.
Lastly, I want to ask you about a disturbing development we have been hearing recently. The pandemic is bringing both the good and the bad in society. Since Corona hit in the past 2 months in Tigray, 103 girls are sexually abused. In Amhara, thousands of underage girls are forced into marriage. Even in Addis alone, according to Addis Ababa Women and Children Affairs Bureau, 101 children have been raped, some of them by their own fathers. But none of them have been taken to the court, according to Chief Justice Maaza Shanafi. What should be done in time like this? What's your view on this alarming report?
This is something that is kind of in our society. We know girls face a lot of issues. And this is something before COVID, before all of this, girls have always faced. There's molestation with underage girls. There's gender-based violence, there's teen marriage, everything that you've just mentioned. And what happens during these types of crises is the most vulnerable are the first ones to suffer the most. And this is a result of that, and that's what we're starting to see. And with a lot of this, with a lot of this kind of coming out, something that was really interesting to me was the fact that it was these numbers came from hospitals. Specifically, the children molestation numbers came from hospitals. They did not come from the court. This is not something that came from the police station because they've been kind of sued. This is something that came from the hospitals, and they checked in the court, and there wasn't even one case that was in courts when this report came out. And since then, as you've seen, there's been a lot of kind of activation, and there's been a lot of people kind of talking about it, and we even have the song Zim Anilem, which you know, talks about, you know, this silence is the thing that's kind of killing us all, and specifically with young underage molestation, this is something that's kind of hush hush in our society, something that's not talked about and that's kept in the dark. So I think it's just coming up, and it's showing up in different ways right now, and we're looking at it. And what we've seen is that just as a result of a few weeks of digital activations, people speaking up about it, there's now about 36 cases taken to the court. So this is just a testament to whenever you kind of speak out about something, and if you're not kind of keeping it in the dark, there is a way of changing it, and it can actually be made better. And there's been a lot of strides made with regards to girls' rights, girls' education, GBV, and a lot of things. And we shouldn't let this kind of take us backwards. This is something that is kind of currently happening. So this is something that we should also focus on and work on. So we need to kind of forward our finances towards that area, gear our attention to these things, because the most vulnerable are going to suffer the most. And the more we do that, the more we're going to start seeing results.
I just want to add something, though. There is something very particular about COVID in that, look, homes are not safe places for women, you know, and this is not just Ethiopia, this is the world, okay? Home is not a safe place. Let that sink in. So what COVID did is drive us into our homes, you understand? And so when you're looking at gender-based violence globally, often the cases, how they get reported are actually school, when kids are going to school, when they're going to their checkups. It's all the people in the community that kids interface with that feed into a reporting system. What COVID did is cut off those people, right? So our reporting went down, and then the incidents shot up, largely because home is not a safe place. You know, and what I wish people would consider, and let's talk about, is it shouldn't take a pandemic for us to think about and do something about home not being a safe place for young women. And, you know, and kids, in all honesty, it's not just girls, right? So I think that idea is part of, okay, what is this new world we're going to create? How do we have real conversations about changing people's risks in their homes, you know? Because health starts way, 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 way before you walk into a doctor's office. That's why I left medicine, truth be told, is because it's so obvious, you know? Some people say the biggest bang for your buck, you know, is just make sure kids attain a certain amount of education. That alone has a huge impact on health gains. So there is so much research, there's so much data about what we can do. We just don't do it, you know? We just don't do it. And I think COVID has just shined this light because it's exposed and exacerbated all the faults in our society, right? And made it really plain for even the people who, you know, I studied health disparities my whole life, right? I mean, I did this work professionally. But now what I think is so interesting is like all these people are seeing things for the first time, quote unquote, you know? So like there is an opportunity, and how do we align our resources and build the coalitions to find the political will, build that power, and then really talk about normative change? Because that's what needs to happen, right? The norms have to change. And the reality is funders don't invest in normative change. They get scared of it. Cultural change is like, how do I do that? But the reality is until we really start to push, and this is where art is so helpful, it's really doing the high-hanging fruit, you know? And we're kind of on the margins of what's possible until we really reach for that high-hanging fruit, especially when it comes to women and girls, in my opinion. So, yeah.
With your previous work, you dealt with, Liya, did you have, I mean, I want to, while on this, I want you to comment on Difret as well.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's a movie that deals with forced marriage, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Alafa.
Yeah.
Yeah, Difret was Difret was a project that was really taking on a cultural issue. The director, Zara Sanai, born and raised in Ethiopia. What's so interesting is he grew up with this idea of Alafa, had heard about it, never really questioned it. And then when he became a filmmaker later on in his life, he's like, this is a little weird. Like, how do we just kind of not say, like how do we hear about something like Alafa and kind of just normalize that? And that was his entry point into that story. And I think projects like Defret, stories that are really tackling normative change is really important because what it does is build a community of people who believe in that other world, you know? And this is why stories are powerful. They act as a portal. You walk through that line and you no longer see the world in the same way. You know what I mean? You're not gonna look at Elephant and be like, that's actually really messed up. Like if someone said, like, that's actually a violent tradition. And I think, you know, to his credit, what he did is, I think, tell a story without demonizing the people, which is very hard when you're talking about something like Elefa. How do you tell that in a way that is not going to be disrespectful, demonizing, and all of that stuff? Obviously, it won a lot of awards and et cetera, but I think the real heart of that movie was like an Ethiopian man asking a very deep question about his tradition and trying to tell a story about that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you were about to say something, but let me ask you, you've been working with Yenya for the last 7 years, you know, tackling the social ills, underage marriage, gender-based violence. Still it's happening, it's going up. Don't you guys feel frustrated at times?
This is a good question. I remember after doing Yenya for like 1 year, there was, we did research and then was a room full of people, and then there was findings around what changed and what didn't. And then we were so like disheartened and just frustrated because of the very, very tiny shift we saw, and it wasn't large enough, and we were all kind of, you know, ambitious, and we wanted to kind of see a huge shift and things like that. And some things that I've learned since then is that, I mean, behavior change is a very long game, and it's really difficult to attribute, to kind of measure as well, but it's something that, you know, you need to invest in and you need to kind of believe, because if you're working towards a new normal, and if you're trying to change if you already agree that this normal is not good, there's something wrong in what's happening currently, then you need to invest in actively trying to change it. And the only way, I mean, what I was going to add earlier was that this data darkness that's happening with regards to adolescent girls is also the same thing. And what we try to do with Girl Effect is we always start from data. Like, so we always start to kind of first look at what girls are saying. And an interesting thing that came to me was that when you were saying girls are not safe at home, I remember a lot of girls said the place that they felt the safest was at school through the data that we had. And that's closed now. And this is it's very kind of eye-opener, isn't it? Like a place in which they're not most of the time is the place in which they are the safest. And now that that's closed, it kind of has created this gap between where they should be and where they're at. And because of that, there's also going to be a lot of dropouts. That we expect girls that, you know, that have stopped school now might not go back because of different reasons. So this is something that we just, you know, we cannot ignore, and we just have to pay attention to, because just because there is this thing, there is COVID-19, and obviously there's the doctors and there's everything that's happening around it to be able to solve that. But everything else in the world has not changed that much. Everything else, as in, you can see from the Black Lives Matter, there was this line which was, silence is violence. And that's, I mean, couldn't be more true, especially in this type of circumstances and in these types of issues. So that's something that I just want everyone to know and to keep in mind. And the more you speak about it and the more you kind of challenge people, the more you'll be able to change and to shift. And that's what we've seen through Yenya in the past 6 years. And we've actually seen some real change as well. So there's data that we can kind of show you and things like that show there's actual shift made with regards to knowledge, because that's our biggest thing as well as a society. If we don't know about our health, then we can't really do much about it. So that's the first step. We have to get people knowing, enough people knowing about the things first. And then there's attitude and kind of shifting, okay, so now that I know better, then maybe my attitude wasn't the right one. And then there's the behavior that comes after it. So it's a long, we're in it for the long haul, and I could see some change happening.
Mihret, you mentioned Black Lives Matter. Liya also mentioned it. You dealt with identity issue in your previous work, White Little Lie?
Little White Lie.
Little White Lie. Mm-hmm. We have our own demon when it comes to racism, or we can call it ethnicism. What lessons your previous works and current race-related developments teach us to go forward and somehow create a peaceful coexistence?
Look, I mean, what the Black Lives Matter movement is largely about is tackling a belief system, right? That has structured history and flows from our history and opportunity. In the same way, I think Ethiopia has its own set of belief systems and what we believe about each other. And that's the problem, right? And so how do you create a new belief system, right? I mean, that's the answer. How do we learn to let go of what we think we know about each other and actually embrace the person in front of you, regardless? You know, for me, this whole conversation is very frustrating simply because, you know, I grew up outside of Ethiopia because of the Derg and all this stuff, tried to kill my dad, etc. And so, you know, in the whole world, we're all black people, ultimately. So when you come to Ethiopia, a land of all black people, and then black people are also fighting with each other, it's just, it's sad. But I think it actually stems from the same problem, which is that we don't know each other's stories for what they are. There's a whole bunch of perceptions before you walk into a room if I'm from one tribe and you're from another tribe. And there's history that's already in that room that people then play out and perform, you know, instead of somehow, and I think a lot of that has to do, I mean, it has to do with identity and how we're socialized into who we are, right? And by the way, that's just not ethnic identity, even gender, right? I mean, girls and women, some of the most impressive data around delaying the onset of pregnancy in young girls, what they call sexual debut, like pushing that age, is girls having a bigger sense of who they are, like sports, being a good soccer player, in addition to, instead of what society tells you you are, actually empowers you to think about yourself differently. I think in the same way we have to, in Ethiopia, figure out ways of building stories and that allow us to connect, you know, so that when I walk into a room, my tribe and who I am isn't already, and the perceptions of that haven't already populated a conversation, you know? And I think the same thing, like, this is why identity is super interesting, because I think whichever way you talk about it, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be Amara, what it means to be, you know, Tigray, what it means to be Oromo, all of these things are actually about the socialization process, the stories we tell about who we are, and then how that defines what we can or cannot do. In Ethiopia, we haven't had a conversation yet, I don't think, a real conversation about how you unlearn some of that stuff. How do you let go of that stuff and create identities? You know, God bless our prime minister. He's doing, I think, you know, trying to have that conversation of like unity, love, and peace. But unity, love, and peace requires everyday work, you know. You can't do the societal level work without doing the day-to-day work in your families, in your homes, in the people you talk to. And so that's what it's about, you know, and Little White Lie was, you know, an attempt to show people how to have that conversation and how to put a process into place that can heal a family, heal the lies that we tell, the betrayal, the denial, and start to face the truth and live with it.
Wow, interesting. We are coming to an end. Just before we close, though, Dr. Mihret, you've released during the pandemic a feature film, Sweetness in the Belly. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen it.
Shame.
I've read the book, though.
The book's amazing.
Hollywood actors like Dakota Fanning, Yahya Abdul Mateen, as well as Kunal Nayar, the Indian, we know as Rajesh. I call him Rajesh in Big Bang Theory, has played it. But I've seen the trailer. My first reaction is, oh, this is a typical Hollywood representation. It actually reminded me of the Red Sea diving resort.
It's totally not, but is she? First of all, you attempting to critique my movie without seeing it is mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling. I just have to say that for the record.
Yeah,
so the audacity to do that, step back, number one. Number two, though, I will give you a lesson anyway, which is an artist moves with their body of work, right? You know, Zara Sanai and I think, have established ourselves as filmmakers that are very focused on positioning African stories and Ethiopian stories through our lens, through a centered perspective. Sweetness in the Belly was a monumentous achievement, and I will tell you why. Because the financing, the global politics that informs film financing is very colonial. So we have things called production treaty grants that allows filmmakers to have access to international financing. The way those financing schemes are structured, you basically, in Africa, have to have been a colonized country to have access to financial capital as a co-production. Sweetness in the Belly was an Irish-Canadian co-production, okay? Which means that there were Irish taxpayer money and Canadian taxpayer money. When that happens, the director has to be Canadian or Irish, okay? And this is what I mean by colonial. So imagine that, right? So Ethiopia does not have a co-production treaty because we've never been colonized. Now let's really analyze what that means. That means that Habesha filmmakers can have access to international capital that will allow them to do a $5 million film, right? Because our governments haven't had those relationships. So we can't tell the stories in a way to compete with the international world because we haven't had that history, which I think is ludicrous. So I've been trying to get our government to sign its first co-production treaty, and our former CEO of Ethiopian tourism was so fabulous and so helpful in this regard. We worked really hard together. When I knew Sweetness was coming, I was like, what are the things we can do to set Ethiopia up so that this is not just one film, but will set a pathway for Ethiopia to have other treaties. The amazing and monumentous thing that happened is the Canadian producers fought for Z to be a director on a Canadian and Irish financed film, and they won. It's never been done. An African director to helm a Canadian, it's never happened. So that story is huge, and it means so much. It's actually opening a door for other African filmmakers to go through. So the reason why Z and I were so taken by this story is it really makes you think of home across all of its dimensions in very different ways. It makes you think about religion, and that religion can actually bring us together. It doesn't have to tear us apart. So what was at the core of the story was very profound, you know. So, and the story was actually based on a British girl. There was no Ethiopian girl at the center of the story. It was always about a British girl who was orphaned and finds her way into Harar. So for all of those reasons, it became an absolute project we had to do, you know. And when you see it, I will be happy to answer any question.
Thank you. Where can viewers get it? It's
on iTunes, at Amazon, and I'm sure on your Flash in Ethiopia, because you can't stop those things.
Last questions to both of you. Liya, what should we expect from Yenya?
What should we expect? A lot of more good stuff. We're working on that currently, aren't we?
Good stuff. Mihret, shall we expect any movie?
I told you I have another movie coming out next February, but right now I'm working on Yenya very hard, and we hope to have a really new format. Actually, I'm excited about the new format of Yenya.
Great.
I think it will be great.
We have come to an end. Thank you for watching. Thank you both for your contribution, Dr. Mihret Mandefro and Liya Haile. Next time, we'll be back with another topic and another guests. Until then, goodbye from me, Begna Simesso, and the team at Addis Matters.